Hi, good evening. Today is February 22nd, 2026, and my name is Reynaldo J. Aguiar Marcano, and I'm recording this from my home at the 2302 Britton Ridge Drive, Katy, Texas, 77494. So this would be the third segment of demo D112. And my goal with this one is to go a little bit deeper into some of the things that we talked about in the previous segment. Um, Particularly, some things related um, to those observations about what I would call a judiciary map reduce, right? Which is this distributed system of judges that they have to attack targets. Um, which I in the previous segment I made the philosophical argument that it could be categorized as a species, right? Really, as a living organism composed by different people, right? Um, so I would like to talk a little bit more about that, and just a few other small legal topics. So to begin, I think a good place to begin would be to tell you a little bit more about those metrics that I described in the previous segment. So in the previous segment, I said something to the effects that um, I developed a couple of metrics, but I didn't really go into the details about how those metrics are computed. Like you may think that these are estimates, right? That these are guesses, but they're really not, right? Like they're really very deterministic metrics. So I want to give you more details on how I compute them. So to recap or to catch up on that part of the previous segment, what I did was to look at the vectors of attacks that they've been employing consistently against me for the last 5 years. Right when things started escalating, when Briscoe saw that I had developed key opinion leaders. Well, really, the Communist Party of China uh, saw that I had developed key opinion leaders.com. So since that point forward, all they have been doing to do consistently is one of two things: attack me financially, meaning trying to drive me into bankruptcy, or attack me with my family, like harming people that I care about, right? Or separating me from them. Um, so kind of a psychological attacks, right? Like, but using as a vector your family, right? And this has been consistent over the last 5 years. They haven't done anything else, anything, let's say, new other than that, right? So this tells me that these two vectors of attack are the vectors of attack, right? That the Communist Party of China has used for decades to get to where they are, really, in terms of world domination and world control. So this led me to think, right? If you are the Communist Party of China and you want to create a society, a parallel society, you obviously would have to put the power in the hands of, but you have to make the power distributed, right? For the reasons of resiliences that I described before. If you concentrate the power in a single individual, if that person dies or revolts, the system goes into chaos. So what you have to do is to split the power into multiple individuals, right? So nobody individually holds too much power. This makes the system resilient. And if there has to be a figuring of power, like a political leader or something like that, that position has to be set up in a way that it's easily replaceable, right? If the person dies or you decide to kill him, right, like what happened with Chavez, you can replace him very quickly with anybody, Maduro, right? And it doesn't really affect the continuance of the system, right? The system keeps running. And I compare this strategy or this design philosophy to SuperRoot at Google. This is a bit technical, but I'm guessing that when these people learn about this information, everybody will know what SuperRoot is. So I'm not going to go into much detail here about what it is. So like following this line of thinking, what I did was to develop metrics to measure this deterministically, right? I mean, thinking that, if you were the Communist Party of China, you would naturally want to put the power in the hands of multiple individuals, and it would have to be individuals that have the capability of performing these attacks, obviously, right? Um, because it makes logistical sense, right? Like, you wouldn't want to create a powerful individual that doesn't have these characteristics in this society that they're creating, right? So this led me to the creation of those metrics. But again, don't think that those metrics are guesses or are estimates or heuristics. Those metrics are deterministic. And I want to tell you a little bit more about how I compute them. So what I did was to gather or to use the court records that I already have, right? In those court records, like for example, orders, like, if you scrape, I'm talking more on technical details, right? As an engineer, as a software engineer, if you scrape, or if you have a database, it doesn't matter how you get the records, right? But if you have a database of court records, like cases, like the dockets, the dockets and the orders that belong to each case that each judge has decided over the last year, suppose. In those orders, you will see things like, for example, when Judge Telfair entered that order, that, sorry. You will see things like when Judge Telfair entered that order in my case, for example, in my family case, right? He entered that order saying the void order that he entered when he had no jurisdiction, so it's invalid. But if you read the order, it has a dollar amount. It says you have to pay this much money on, whatever, right? Per month. You have, for some other people, it would say you have to give the house to the other party, right? The car, who's going to take this car and who's going to take that car, right? So you see, all these things have a monetary value that it's a dollar figure that I can accumulate and sum up per judge, right? I can aggregate this number per judge. So what is the dollar amount that this judge costs to change hands per year? That is a metric, right? And you can see this depends on many things. It depends on, for example, where the judge is located. Because, for example, a hypothetical example, right? A judge in Manhattan, in New York City, would have a discretionary power over money much higher than Telfair. Why? Well, because people in that zip code, the average income, I think, is $1.5 million per year, right? But in Katy, it's $90,000 or $100,000, right? Per capita, or I don't know, $60,000. I don't know what it is, right? I can't recall. But you see, so depending on where the judge is, this number would change because the cases he will be exposed to, he or she, will have, in average, the distribution will be very different, right? In monetary value. So that's one metric. How many dollars per year this judge can cost to change hands? You can also aggregate this metric by the administrative judges. Well, in general, by who controls the judges, right? Because it depends on the setup and depends on the type of court. Like, for example, it could be the county judge. In the case of Katy, it would be George, I think his name is KP George. It could be Judge Brown, who is the administrative judge of the 11th region. In the case of, I'm talking about the courts here locally, right? How they aggregate up the chain. In the case of a federal court, for example, you could think about SDTX, the Southern District of Texas, and you can aggregate that by who controls that court. I mean, who has supervisory power over that court, meaning the Fifth Court of Appeals, right? Who has supervisory power over that court and also courts in New Orleans and other parts of Texas. So you can aggregate, you can aggregate by judge, you can aggregate by court, you can aggregate by region. So you can do different levels of aggregation and compute this metric across different levels, right? So basically what you're computing is what is the power that every particular judge or even a court have in terms of, and this is not hypothetical, this is actual monetary value that this court has demonstrated to have. You can think about it this way, right? Like they already demonstrated to have this power because they have created these orders in the last year, right? On whatever period of time you are analyzing this, right? So that's one metric. The second metric is Similar idea, but with number of children. So how many children Josh Telfair, for example, right, has ordered to change hands in this way that he did with me, meaning, cutting off the parental rights of one parent and giving the child to the other. Which, by the way, I want, this is something that I've learned, during this process, and I've always been to say it, but I always forget to say it, but it's important, right? This thing that you're seeing of taking a child and giving it to another party could be a parent, but could be somebody else. This is not new. This is exactly what the Operation Condor did in the 70s. Exactly. Like when they had a target, and I read this in some history writings, when they had a target, what they would do, they would kidnap the child, sometimes legally, with courts, with judges and stuff, but sometimes illegally. Like sometimes they would just take the child and they would give it to an opposing party. So, for example, if it was a political opponent, a leftist political opponent, they would take the child and would give it to somebody powerful that wanted to have a child and couldn't, for example, from the right wing, right? So now your political opponent has your child, right? And that is a powerful weapon, right? I mean, in that situation, right? And this is exactly what they're doing, right? Like they're taking your child and then they're giving it to an adverse party that is adverse to even your ideals, right? So anyhow, the second metric is, but what I want to tell you there is that this is nothing new. Like, don't think that this has been going on for at least 50-something years, right? I mean, the thing with the children, right? But that's the other metric, right? So how many children every judge has demonstrated to have the power to change, to make the child, be under the care of somebody else. So if you aggregate by these two metrics, right, children, number of children, and money per year, that is the metric that I use to compute. You can think of that of the firepower of every single judiciary actor in this network. That is effective because, like they're using the judges as weapons. I'm talking about the Communist Party of China. So, what is the firepower of each judge? That's basically what I'm computing, right? So that's that's what I do. So now let me show you. Let me share my screen with you to show you how this evolved, right, over the last few days. I mean, this project. So I'm sharing my screen with you. Okay. So until this point, I mean, last week until last week I have been working on this book, on the second volume of the January docket, which is basically a compilation of legal documents and complaints and supplement to the complaints that I filed with the DOJ, but specifically to my case, right? Like the first volume is more higher level, but the second volume is specifically about Josh Telfair, George Brown, David Perwin, all these actors locally that have been doing this to take my son. So what happened was, when I had this realization, right, about the judges really being the ones running this scheme, I mean, this network, right, this RICO enterprise, really. And I'm listening to the demo because I'm doing QA on the audio, and I'm at the same time looking at this visual that you have on the screen right now. I mean, the front cover of the book, of the volume 2, where I have those judges and attorneys. There's some attorneys in there as well, but they are aligned in a row, right? Two rows, really. One row, the upper row is state actors. So those are state level judges, and the lower row are the two federal judges that until that point were involved, right? Directly involved in obstructing justice. So when I see this, what I thought was, I mean, this looked to me like nodes in a distributed system that had been laid flat. That's what it looks. I mean, with this renewed understanding of the situation that I have now, I look at this cover, and what I see is not really judges. They're nodes I mean, to me, it's obvious, right? They're just nodes arranged in a flattened manner. So what I did was, well, if this is really a distributed computing system 3 that in which the node has been flattened, I could reconstruct the structure by using the metrics I just described, right? So all I have to do is compute the metrics for all these judges and and rank them, and that would basically give me the structure of the tree. Like I can deflatten the tree in a way. I'm talking about computer software, right? Software engineering. So this is exactly what I did, right? And with this, I created a new cover, right? Which is what I'm going to tell you. I'm going to show you, which is this one, right? So this is, the typical triangle that people that working in distributed system would use to represent a hierarchical distributed system, like the, Muppet or Google Search or Hadoop or MapReduce. But the nodes in here, the judges that were in the other cover, are now arranged by their score. And you can see what I was mentioning in the previous segment. You can see this visually. You can see that Judge Terry Adams, who is the Chief Justice of the first Court of Appeals in Texas, is the individual in this network with the most power if you rank them by this metric, by these two metrics, right? Because he decides on cases that are worth billions of dollars, like that deep ocean drilling company case that we saw in demo 97, 98, I can't recall. And he decides on the appeals on cases that touch on the parental rights of literally hundreds of parents per year. And don't take my word, like you don't take my word for it. Like, all you have to do is go to SCO TX, so like Supreme Court of Texas, right? Abbreviated, watch.org. And if you do this in your browser, it will take you to this dashboard that I built using the data in the Venezuela Intelligence Index. And this data is aggregated by case, by court, using the points in the GeoIndex. Right? And I did this exercise in a demo live. Like this is recorded how I did this. And you can see this big bar is Chief Justice Adams. Like all the cases, I mean, the majority of the cases that he touches on, the parties and the attorneys, or at least one of the parties and the attorneys, are marked in the GeoIndex that Diosdado Cabello gave me in 2024. And you can see the disproportion of this, and it's obvious that this is not random, right? Like he's obviously a weapon, right? And he's a powerful weapon in this system. And that gives him a lot of power. So this is why I dropped that conclusion that he is more powerful than Greg Abbott, right? And he is probably at the top of this hierarchy, right? So this is and all these are cases touching, minors, children, right? Like that they have taken away from one parent and things like that. And all these cases, in this case, ended up in the Supreme Court of Texas, right? You can see that by the number, by the case numbers, right? I have only 4 digits. I mean, after the 25. 25 is a year, and the other one is the case number. And my case number is, of course, in that list, right? So, so yes. So that's basically, what I did. But here I want to tell you, right? When you see this triangle in this new cover, so this would basically be the volume 3 of the book. So what I did, I took the second segment of this demo, so the 112.2, and I turned it into a book, because it seems to me like it's a unifying theory of what is happening, right? Not to me, but like in general, how this situation evolved over the last 30 years. This abomination, I would call it, right? Of this merge of technology, with all these distributed systems for espionage, for attacking citizens using the judiciary systems of their own countries, powered by technology, right? How this has evolved over the last, 30 years. So I turned this into a book, right? It's a short book, and this is the cover. But I want to give you the disclaimer that when you see this, right, you see, for example, here, what I did is that I merged visually. For example, you can see that the judges on the state side, so the ones on the left, so those are Texas judges, right, from the state judiciary system, while the ones on the right, meaning in this case, Justice Crane, Justice Hittner, and Judge Hanks. They are on the federal side, but I'm putting them all together in the same triangle. But I want to tell you that this is for illustrative purposes, right? Like, this is not in reality how it works. I think, and this is also what I'm telling you, is based on analysis of those metrics that I described. I think in reality what they have is not one, but two of these triangles. They have one for the, I mean, I'm talking about the network, right? So they have one societal system like this for state judges. And they have another societal system like this for federal judges, okay? But, you know, and here something interesting happened, right? An interesting observation. What I did was that I started, you know, working with this hypothesis of having two separate triangles, right? Because obviously it's two separate judiciary systems, right? So I started aggregating the metrics that I'm describing, number of children taken, and amount of money that the judge cost to change hands across these two different systems separately, right? To see how they compare. And it seems to me like there is a serious anomaly in what I'm seeing in the data. Let me tell you what I'm saying. This is just, you know, an observation, right? I don't know if this is the case, but somebody should probably, I mean, the DOJ or somebody should look into this, right? What I'm seeing is that if you look at these two hypothetical triangles, right, and you aggregate these metrics across the entire triangle, in this case, at least in this set of cases that I'm looking at in Texas, the state triangle, meaning the state actors, seem to have a disproportionate amount of firepower in terms of these two metrics that I'm describing, compared to the federal judges. Which seems to me counterintuitive, because as I understand it, and maybe I'm wrong here, but as I understand it, first of all, the federal system seems to have a higher level of authority than the state court system. Like, in theory, if the state judiciary actors misbehave or do something illegal, you can go to federal court and they would correct it. They should, right? So from what I understand, hierarchically, the federal courts have supervisory power over the state courts. And this has to do with the way this country, the United States, is set up, legally speaking, the legal framework, right? So that's one observation. And because of that, you would think that the cases that are heard on the federal side of things in Texas, for example, in the Southern District of Texas, would be higher level, higher impact cases. Like, you know, you would see things where, you know, more children are changing hands, or you know, more higher amounts of money. Right? And the other anomaly that I see is that if you think about the statistical distribution of cases, right, that are heard, because you could think, well, this is because of how the law works, right? I mean, the first observation is because the state courts are the ones that are charged with the task of dealing with family and money. So, of course, they're going to have the higher metrics in those areas that you're describing because of their charter, in a way, right? Could be. But the second anomaly cannot be explained by that. The second anomaly is, well, you know, if you have a universe of cases in the state court system, all things considered, a certain percentage of them should spill towards the federal arena, because things couldn't be resolved because the party wasn't happy, whatever, right? But a percentage of those cases should go to the federal arena, right, organically. And if you look at those, the distribution of those cases in terms of number of children taken or amount of money taken should be comparable to the ones in the state courts, because there are a subset of them. And this is not true in this case. The cases that you see in federal court, the distribution of the cases among themselves is very different than the distribution of the cases among themselves in the state court. So this is unexplainable, how this has happened, right? And here I have a theory, and it's just a theory. I cannot prove this. You know, I don't think I should try to prove it. Like, this is something that needs to be investigated by a team of people that are specialized in this. But I think the reason is because this network is intentionally splitting the way they use these two triangles, these two societal systems, for different purposes. So I think this is really a footprint of how the Communist Party of China is using these judges. I think that's the reason. So my theory is that the state courts are used as a weapon. For example, to take children, to drive people into bankruptcy, things like that. While the federal court system is used as a shield only, meaning only to obstruct justice, to make sure that these judges on the state side are never held accountable. See? So it's a separation of function, but this is created by the Communist Party of China and Diosdado Cabello, really. It's not an organic consequences of the cases themselves. And this is why, if you look at this, I mean, this is consistent with what I'm telling you, that if you look at this chart, at this triangle that I'm showing you on the screen right now, you see that by these two metrics that I'm describing, Judge Terry Adams is more powerful than Judge Crane, who is the Chief Justice of the federal court. And this is a tremendous anomaly. I mean, you would think that by these aggregated metrics, Justice Crane, who is the Chief Justice of the federal court in Houston, would be a more powerful judge than, Terry Adams. This is counterintuitive, right? But again, I think this is a consequence of the misuse, I mean, the intentional routing and assignment of cases and, attacks really from the people that are controlling the judiciary from the top, right? Like the Communist Party of China and Diosdado Cabello, to attack people using these courts as a weapon in one case in the state system and as a shield on the federal side of things, right? But and here, this observation brings to my mind a thought, right? Like, this seems to me like a dangerous situation, because it seems like an inversion, like a perversion, really, of the organic or the natural hierarchy that should exist between these two systems. I mean, the way the United States legal system is set up is that the federal courts have supervisory power over the state courts, right? And this is necessary for the entire state to function. I don't know. It seems to me like, first of all, it seems to me like a dangerous situation that the federal system seems to be subjugated to the state system. Like, this is really what it means, right? That the people calling the shots are these state judges and have more authority and power in practice than the federal judges, right? So that's one, and I'm saying this is dangerous because this is the kind of thing that, could lead to a misunderstanding between people and could lead to a confrontation, right? This could end into a separatist movement, right? Something like that, a civil war. Like, this is the kind of thing that in other countries have created civil wars. So it's a concerning thing, right? Seeing this, and this, remember, this is derived from data. Like, I'm not, these are not guesses or assumptions, right? Or ideas. Like, these people here are organized, ranked by these metrics. So I don't know. It seems like a dangerous situation, right? And a perversion, really, of the systems that everybody had agreed to, live under. But the other observation, the other thought is that it's interesting to see also how they did it, right? I mean, how the Communist Party of China did this, right? In this case, in this area, right? Because you see, like, it seems to me like the mechanism is that they figure out that they can't, subvert the order in all the country, right? So what they did, because they have these hubs, is that, by using bribes and crypto payments and things like that, they, managed to invert the order and make the judiciary judges, outrank, in a way, the federal judges, but in this area only, right? And this is by a combination of, the federal judges subjugating themselves to the state actors. And you can see this in the cases, right, that I've been working on in my own cases, right? If I go to, when I went and filed a federal lawsuit for violation of civil rights against all these state judges and enter evidence in the docket, what did Judge Hittner do? Right? Instead of opening an investigation or referring this to the FBI, he struck the complaint out of the record. right? To protect the state actors, right? So he's there surrendering his power as a federal judge to these people, right? That's what he did. He basically, I don't know how to say this, but it feels like he abdicated as a judge, right? He he surrendered, right, to them when he did that. And this is how the Communist Party of China inverts the the natural order in the judiciary, right? And once they create this perversion, democracy decays. Because what it really means is that there is no federal oversight over even the politicians in Texas. I mean, if you try to sue the governor of Texas, and I'm not guessing here, I'm trying to sue the governor of Texas, you can't, because the federal judges, you will have to sue him, in federal court. The federal judges will strike the complaint out of the record, right? So they are unsuable. You cannot sue Greg Abbott in Texas. I mean, even in the federal system, you have to sue him in Washington, right? In another state, maybe, right? But in Texas, in the federal court system, you cannot possibly sue Greg Abbott, right? And this is what makes democracy decay, because it creates impunity, and with that leads to corruption. Right? So the mechanism, understanding that is important, right? Because that's what people, I think, right, people that are tasked with fixing this problem need to watch for, right? This dangerous inversion of responsibility. And all the things that are implied in that. But what I wanted to tell you is that in this cover of this book, when you see this triangle, this is just for illustrative purposes, in the sense that I've merged the two triangles into one. But in reality, there's two triangles, right? There's one for state courts and there's one for federal courts. Both are compromised in the same way. It's the same mechanism. Both are using the intelligence apparatus of, Robert Mueller / Gustavo Cabello. Both are using, both have the reproductive organ. It's a different reproductive organ, but both systems have their own reproductive organ set up in exactly the same way. In the case of the state judiciary, the reproductive organ is Greg Abbott, because he can name new judges. In the case of the federal courts, the reproductive organ is something else, because that person can also name new judges, right? But it's the same setup. It's exactly the same setup. It's replicated, right? It's only that they're isolated. But they have two distinct functions. The state function, the state apparatus, is used to attack people like me, right? Like people that are speaking up against the network, or that are problematic, or that don't allow their technology to be stolen by the Communist Party of China. They get attacked, right, with the state courts. And if they go complain to the federal system, then the federal triangle that the Communist Party of China set up in the same hub will protect the others, right? That's the way it works. But now, speaking of these triangles, I want to tell you a small, short story about something I worked on at Google when I was an engineer there. This was maybe 2016, I would say, or 17. It was a project called Artemis that I created. And I'm not going to go too much into the details, because I don't want to get this technical session, like an engineering session per se. But the problem I was trying to solve when I had that idea is that in all distributed systems, even like the one I'm describing here, you have a problem of retrieval, that it's inherent. It's inherent to the distributed nature of the system. And it's impossible to fix for statistical reasons. I'm not going to go deep into that, but believe me for a second that that's the case. There is a flaw in all the distributed systems in the planet that it's unfixable, right? Imagine that for a second. So, and Google had this problem, right? Especially with Google search. So I had an idea on how to fix it. The way I fixed it is by creating this project called Artemis. And Artemis, I gave it that name because Artemis, and it's the same name I gave to the non-governmental effort that I'm pushing forward. Artemis, according to Greek mythology, was a goddess that was the protector of the weak and the children. Right? And in these distributed systems, like the ones I'm describing, this retrieval problem is caused specifically on results or items that are not very prominent. They could fall through the cracks in a way. So the way I fixed the problem was by having the root. In this case, imagine the node at the top. Imagine, Chief Justice Terry Adams, right? He's the root. He would be the root in this distributed system. The way I fixed that problem at Google in 2016 was by having the root of the Google search talk directly to the leaves, to some of the leaves in some of the cases, not for every query. You cannot do this for every query because it wouldn't scale. But you could do this for 1% of the queries, right? And 1% of the queries at Google is a lot of queries, right? So I mean, this was a huge infrastructure project that I worked on, and it worked. It worked beautifully, right? And I pulled this off by communicating between the root and the leaves directly for some of the queries. Telling you this short story because when I see this distributed system that they have, and especially in the cases I'm working on, the legal cases, I can see the same pattern. You can see that in this line between Chief Justice Terry Adams and William Cal Adams here at the bottom, who is the attorney that owns the law firm that kidnapped my child, in combination with the judges. But like the law firm that did this and created the fraudulent documents to deceive the court where Chief Justice Adams is the Chief Justice. That man is William Cal Adams. And note that the two of them have the name Adams. That's because they're family. But you see, this is nothing else. I mean, this setup of having the guy at the top and the guy at the bottom being family is not coincidental. It's the same software design system that I used at Google in 2016. It's a way of making the root be able to talk to the leaf. I believe the problem the Communist Party of China solved with this design in this case is that this allows these two people, because they're family, to have a barbecue together on a Sunday, right? And talk about the case. And this wouldn't create suspicion. Like, if the FBI is looking, well, these are just two people that are family and are having time together, right? It doesn't look like an improper ex parte communication, or that they're plotting together to kidnap the child, right? It gives plausible deniability to their communications. But philosophically, I mean, from a software engineering point of view, this is nothing more than the root talking directly to the leaf, right? And I don't know, when I saw that, it was interesting to me. And I'm not saying it only because it's interesting, but because I imagine this is standardized. I imagine they have this set up everywhere, right? So if I was authorities, the DOJ, I would look for judges that, according to these two metrics, fall at the top of the pyramid in a hub, and they have a brother or a sister or a cousin or a mother or somebody that is an attorney, right? That is working on family cases. I mean, this has to be standardized. So that's why I mention it. Okay, the next topic I have is information I received from the informant recently. I can't recall exactly what day was that, but he warned me, right, of the following. In these demos because there's been a lot of issues with the clerk. It's clear that the clerks are a weapon, right? At this point, every single clerk in every single of these courts has done something to obstruct justice, right? To different degrees of severity, but all of them have done something. So the informant told me, listen, yes, the clerks are in it, but these strategies, some of the strategies that they're deploying are really designed by the chief justices or whoever controls the judge, right? In some cases, the judge will be controlled by somebody else who is not the chief justice. Like in some court systems, there is not a chief justice, right? There is something else, an administrative judge or a county judge. There could be something else, but whoever controls the judge is really who is designing the strategy. So he told me these are like a small pods, right? Like it's like the team lead, the one that is designing this, right? The clerk is used because the clerk has the password to the system and has the administrative access to create documents and delete documents, right? But really what they're doing is impersonating the clerk in a way, right? To use that figure as a shield, to not have to say, yes, I know about the conspiracy, and not only that, I'm part of the conspiracy, right? So they use the clerk's access to, obstruct justice, to protect themselves, but it's really the judges, right? So this is what the informant told me. And again, this is an informant that works for the Venezuelan army intelligence, right? According to him. But that's the information I got, right? And speaking of clerks, now I'm going to tell you something else. Let me show you this, right? So if we go to the Fort Bend County systems and we look for the family cases, and we look for that case where Josh Telfair has been, doing this for almost a year at this point. He entered more orders. This is incredible. Today, Sunday, right? Wow. Well, so this is what happened, right? You see index 176 here, right? In 176, this was done by Beverly McGrew Walker. This is what they did. When I filed the application with the Supreme Court of the United States, I served her, right? Because she's a party that is naming the complaint in the federal cases. So when I serve her, she gets a copy of the complaint, and in the cover page, it says Supreme Court of the United States, and the defendants are the federal judges. So what she did was that she took the complaint that I'm serving her basically as a defendant, and she filed it into the 387 court, basically making it look like I'm filing into the court. That's what she did. The idea of doing this is to find me in contempt. Because remember, this case is under a temporary, an automatic stay until the Supreme Court rules on the motion to recuse. So this court has no jurisdiction to sign anything. But still, she took that document and filed it as if I had filed it. The idea with doing this is so that the judge can argue that I am myself violating the automatic stay. And then he can move forward and keep going with the case and keep harassing me, right? Because he cannot, because the case is stayed. So, but of course, this is fraud, because I never filed that document with this court. I sent this document to her as a personal service, right? And this document doesn't say anywhere in the cover 387th, or it doesn't have the name of the other party. It doesn't have, my former partner doesn't even appear in that document. So how she made the connection to then file it into this docket, that's something that really is beyond me, right? Like, I don't understand how she did that. But that's what they did, right? And the idea is to create a pretext for the judge to do this, to say, oh no, the case can continue because you filed something, right? I did it. Like, so this is a fabrication from the clerk. And you see what they did, right? So today, being Sunday, they filed this, right? So apparently the court signed, and look, if you click at the application, I mean, if you look at this supposed application, right, that she filed as if I was applying for something, you can see that you cannot see the application, right? So she marked it as private, precisely to make sure that nobody can download it and nobody can see what they're doing. And let's see what the orders say. Let's see if the orders are downloadable, right? Oh no, there are no orders, right? So it's a docket entry. So the judge had a hearing today, right? But what are the orders, right? Okay, so this is the motion for enforcement of temporary orders and motion for additional temporary orders. So this is what he signed, right? You see, you cannot download it. So, it's basically a situation in which nobody knows what he signs, really. I wasn't served with this, I mean, with the order, right? They didn't serve me with the order. He signed it on a Sunday. The court is on an automatic state, waiting for the answer to the third motion to recuse that should be decided on by the Supreme Court of Texas. This case is also in the Supreme Court of the United States, and he is notified because I also serve him, right? So, I mean, it's a combination of judicial abuses that it's just mind-boggling, right? So let's see what happens. But yeah, so that's what Beverly McGrew Walker did. She basically fraudulently created a filing that I did not create. And if you think about it, it's the same TTP, the same technique and tactic that the clerk of the Fifth Court of Appeals on the Fifth Circuit did, right? He created that Frankenstein case that I did not create, right? To ignore my appeal of the document 61 on the case 04890 in front of Judge Hittner, right? So I appealed order 61, and what he did, he created a different appeal for a different order that wasn't what I was appealing. And he attached the wrong document. Like, it's the same thing, right? Creating something, filing something that is not what I filed. In this case, I didn't file anything, and she went ahead and filed it. The reason why they did this today is because today I filed a notice with this court, and I sent it to all of them saying, listen, I did not file index 176. This was the clerk doing this intentionally to find me in contempt to put me in prison, right? Violating the mandatory stay. I did not file this, right? And I haven't violated. But so because I did that, he came and signed this docket entry today being Sunday, because when the clerk office opens tomorrow, she would be forced to file my notice, right? So he has to justify that he didn't know, right? That it wasn't me. Basically, that's the idea, right? Things to create deniability, right? In their mind, they're going to be able to explain this. But speaking of this, I also want to tell you something about the clerk of the appellate court of the Fifth Circuit. And that is that I was running the pipeline the other day, and the sequence is described elsewhere, right? Where I describe, I think it was 111, in the demo 111, I described the sequence, right? The rope. That I appealed the order 61, the motion to vacate that I filed in Judge Hittner's court, and the clerk of the Fifth Court of Appeal created an appeal, a fake appeal. Like, he created a fake case, and he backdated it to the day before. I managed to create deniability, right? To say that this wasn't intentional. But then he ignored completely my appeal. I'm appealing document 61. He did not create that case, right? He created something else that he wanted to create. But anyhow, the finding, and this is just an idea. I'm not a prosecutor. I don't know if this is right or not, but it's just an idea I want to offer to authorities, right? If they investigate this and they decide to prosecute them, maybe, right? It could be a tool. So the observation is the following. The legal vaccine pipeline infers that when the clerk of the Fifth Court of Appeals, of the Court of Appeals of the Fifth Circuit, did this, he, in the same motion, he also committed wire fraud, which is a federal crime. So interstate wire fraud. Why? Well, because I went in person to the federal court here in Houston, Texas, and I paid with debit, basically cash, to the clerk, $605 for my appeal for the document 61. And she gave me a receipt that says that I paid that money and that appeal was for the document 61. But then that information got transmitted via interstate wires using the electronic court systems of the court. And this clerk in Louisiana, which is a different state, received that information. And he made the intentional choice of creating a fake case and did not create the case that I paid for. So in effect, he defrauded me of those $605 using interstate wires, because it's the electronic court system of its own court. So although the amount of money is small, it's $605, doesn't matter, right? It's still wire fraud. And that's important because it's a federal crime and the penalties are high. So that's what I wanted to mention. And the last thing I wanted to mention on this segment is that yes, the books, right? So the book level 2, volume 2, I already sent it to about half of the Judiciary Committee of Congress, and they already received it. Just mentioning that as a data point, because I know that all these judiciary actors are really the ones that are running the show, right? So I mean, the Judiciary Committee of Congress, I'm guessing, right, would be charged with at least opening an investigation, when they receive this information. So I wanted to mention that I already started that like a month ago. They already received the book, probably about a month ago. And in terms of, because it's a big committee, I think I have covered almost half of the committee on both sides of the aisle, right? So I wanted to mention that. So with that, I'm going to close demo 112 part 3, and I'll see you on the next one.